Hello friends. This video presents the events of the first days of the beginning of the war between Germany and the Soviet Union on the 22nd of June 1941. This is how the first defenders of the Soviet land fought. The second day was coming to an end. The ammunition was almost all shot, and there was only one shot left for the cannon. There was not a gram of food. There was no communication with anyone either. When dusk came, the fighting gradually began to subside. At night we sent 2 liaisons to the battalion command post, but no one was there. A day earlier, on the 22nd of June 1941, after artillery fire on Soviet positions, the Germans went on the offensive. Machine guns from 3 pillboxes had hit them with crossfire. Between the German attacks, a liaison was sent to the headquarters with a request to bring in shells. But he did not reach the target as it became known later. He met the Germans on the way, got into hand-to-hand combat with them and died heroically. Ammunition was never delivered. It was also said that the driver, who was taking them from the depot, was bombed and flew into the air together with the wagon. In the afternoon, the enemy intensified their attacks. But the pillboxes, supporting each other with fire, so far they were successfully repulsed. However, to do this in the evening became increasingly difficult, because the Germans put more and more guns at direct fire and hit the embrasures of the pillboxes, blinding them, and then attacked. Machine gun ammunition was quickly running out. When it got dark, the attacks stopped. The platoon did not suffer serious losses, except for the death of a liaison officer, but in general the company's position was deteriorating. During the night, a young lieutenant from the Saturday replenishment crawled to the pillbox with a bandaged head and brought the sad news the 38th pillbox, where he was blocked and blown up by the Germans. Almost all its defenders were killed or maimed. On the morning of the 23rd of June, after a short but strong bombardment of the pillbox with heavy shells, the Germans attacked it with tanks. Soviet artillerymen hit 2 of them. The third, not wishing to test its fate, retreated. The enemy did not attack any more from this side. After that, the Germans penetrated to the pillbox from the side of the woods. Covered by tanks, they blocked the neighboring pillbox and it was impossible to help it. Thus, by the evening of the 23rd of June there was only one pillbox left. Behind, in the depth of the position, there was another firing point, but its condition was not known. In the evening, Hitlerites suddenly attacked from the rear. Tanks approached from the side of the unfinished pillbox and began to hit at point-blank range. Having broken the outer, lattice, door, the Germans got out of the tanks, approached the pillbox, but the inner armored door was equipped with a locking device and the Germans could not open it. They started shouting into the machine gun embrasure, "Raus, surrender. Bistro, schnell raus, alles kaputt," and something else, "Ein minutes. I'll open it now," the platoon leader echoed, pushing back the loophole's latch. He fired through it several times with his revolver. There were shouts outside, someone fell, and the others ran to the tanks. The sergeant brought his machine gun and fired a long line at the Germans huddled around the tanks. They hid behind the armor. When the ammunition for the machine gun ran out, the Nazis cautiously approached the door with packets of explosives and, having stacked them at the entrance, returned to the tanks. A few minutes later there was a powerful explosion, which knocked out the armored door and destroyed part of the pillbox. Having confined themselves to this, the Germans moved away. Having recovered a little, the soldiers of the pillbox decided to try to sneak out of the encirclement. They spoilt the guns, took their personal weapons, hand machine gun and the last cartridges, secretly got out of the pillbox in the evening and moved eastwards through the bushes. There was no one in the other pillboxes anymore, except for a few seriously wounded men. Now the Germans could becalm those Russians in the pillboxes, who did not want to surrender in the conditions of complete encirclement, would no longer annoy them. After the war, a German general recalled, the Russian forces held the fortifications and settlements very stubbornly. We were able to occupy them only after a systematic offensive, which cost great losses. And here is how the 38th pillbox of the same 68th fortification fought. Until the evening of the 23rd of June the soldiers from the pillbox and those outside were firing at the enemy, repulsing attack after attack. At night they finished digging trenches, placed machine guns and sentries. In the morning the Germans resumed their attacks. The pillbox survived, but the tank that broke through to it dug trenches, shot and crushed those who did not have time to hide behind concrete walls. The 24th of June 1941, the third day of the war, became for the small garrison the last. The Nazis, in order to suppress the pillbox, put forward several large-caliber guns at direct aiming. The structure shook from shell bursts, chunks of concrete splintered inside, maiming the defenders. The incessant rumbling caused deafness and bleeding from the ears. Some fainted from gunpowder gases and stifling heat. Thirsty, though water was nearby, in the stream behind the pillbox, but it was impossible to get to it. In spite of many hits, the fire from the pillbox did not stop. Both artillery and machine gun installations and machine guns in the embrasures continued to operate. Dozens of German corpses were already darkening on the earthen slopes, and their number was growing. Then Hitlerites blinded the defenders with smoke bombs and let sappers into action. They began to throw large bags with explosives under the walls. Shaken by explosions, shrouded in smoke, the pillbox continued to fight. The sappers' bombers climbed onto the roof, through the shaft from the broken periscope shouted, "Russ, surrender." Shots rang out in reply. And inside fell Tulka bombs, chemical grenades, poured burning petrol, from which the garrison increasingly melted. There were already 3 left of him: Sergeant Zakharov, Cadet Grachev and Cadet Irin. Zakharov was firing the last shells from the damaged gun, the cadets were firing rifles. And then came the finale. Suddenly an explosion of terrifying force shook the entire pillbox to the ground. The ceiling collapsed, blocks of concrete with mangled rebar crumbled down, half-ton steel doors snapped off their hinges. Something hit me hard on the legs and I lost consciousness. When it came back to me, I found myself under a corpse. My ears were ringing, smelled of stinking fumes. My broken and burnt legs were almost unsteady. I crawled in the darkness among corpses and pieces of concrete to the lower floor of the pillbox, squeezed myself through the emergency exit and took a full breath of fresh air. There was no one around. Silence. Apparently, having done their vile deed, Hitlerites left in the evening. With difficulty I crawled to a familiar stream and greedily began to drink cool water. And immediately in bushes I fell asleep. Russian soldier Leonid Irin lay for several days near the destroyed, but not surrendered, pillbox number 38. His broken legs were terribly swollen, and worms appeared in his wounds. Ivan Sazimovich, a peasant, and his 16-year-old daughter Yanina fed him and gave him simple help. They did not take him home. He had a large family and many children. But other villagers, having seen the wounded man, brought him home. When Yanina and her younger brother were feeding the wounded, the Germans appeared. They let the children go, but took the soldier with them. Yanina didn't go home. She went to her uncle in Grodno. Her brother returned home. At night, the Germans came to the Sazimoviches. They brought them to the place where the wounded Urovets was found and all of them were shot. The burial place was covered with dry leaves and branches. Soon the inhabitants of the village of Balanenti noticed something wrong. A rooster was sitting on one of the trees and crowing for several days in a row. When they found and dug up a grave under the tree, they found the Sazimovich family there. All but the youngest had been shot in the head. The baby had been suffocated alive. After the war, Leonid and Yanina met each other at the Sopotsky school at a meeting of the participants of the June battles. Leonik, the Germans shot my whole family, be my brother. From the sudden strong shock, both ended up in hospital.